"You're causing tension, Mom. Maybe it's best if you stay somewhere else for a bit." That's what my son told me, in my own home, the same home where I brought him into this world, the place I painstakingly paid off by scrubbing floors and handling the books from my late husband's garage. I stood at the sink, the very one where I used to wash his baby bottles, and all I could do was nod. Not because I agreed, but because those words hit like a punch I couldn't duck. I turned the faucet on to mask the tremble in my hands, but it was no use. Nothing seemed to help. Just an hour earlier, I had politely asked her, not demanded, mind you, not to smoke inside. "Please, Harper, not in the house," I said, standing in the living room doorway. She was curled up in my husband's old recliner, legs tucked under, holding that cigarette as if it was her right. She looked at me like I'd asked her to set herself on fire. "It's just one," she replied, not budging an inch. I didn't threaten. I simply said no. Firmly, but clearly. 10 minutes later, she stormed into the kitchen, slamming the screen door so hard it rattled the glass. My son Daniel followed her. He didn't appear angry, which would have been easier to handle. No, he looked weary, as if I were some puzzle he needed to solve. "Mom," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "I know it's your place, but we need to keep the peace, all right? She's feeling unwelcomed. It felt like the tiles beneath my feet were shifting, even though I knew they weren't. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I found myself wondering, is he even listening to himself? She lit up a cigarette right there in the house, Daniel. I asked her not to. "But it's just one cigarette," he said, and now she's upset, and somehow I'm the one causing drama. Maybe I should just find somewhere else to stay. It made me feel like a renter, or worse, an overstaying guest. I kept silent, couldn't find the words. My mouth felt parched. So I turned back to the dishes, scrubbing a plate that didn't need it. Harper stayed outside, didn't utter a single word. She just lounged on the porch, wearing that self-satisfied grin, flicking ash into my flower pots. I finished up the dishes, set the kettle on the stove, and sat down, waiting for the tea to boil, hoping it'd remind me that I still mattered in this house. This place isn't anything fancy, never was, but it's more than just bricks and mortar to me. My husband, James, and I bought it when Daniel was just a toddler. It was a disaster back then. No insulation, a leaky roof, the yard overrun with rusty tools and weeds. But we turned it into our home. After James passed away, it's been 15 years now, I kept it up. Painted the siding with my own hands, replaced the gutters, fixed the fence after a storm blew it down. I never asked for help. Then Daniel got divorced and needed a place, and of course, I opened my doors. What mother wouldn't? He came back with boxes and weary eyes. I gave him his old room back and even cleared out the closet I'd been using for winter coats. Those first few weeks, he was quiet, grateful. What's your take on this? Share your reaction in the comments below. He mowed the lawn without me having to ask, took out the trash, joined me for dinner, and, for once, really listened when I spoke. It was like having my son back, the one I used to walk to school, the one who could make me laugh just by walking into a room. Then Harper entered our lives. At first she was all smiles and politeness, calling me Miss Beverly, bringing grocery store flowers, even offering to cook. I thought she was sweet, maybe a bit lost, a tad loud and overly fond of short skirts and eye rolls, but sweet nonetheless. That didn't last. Within 2 weeks, she was critiquing my towel folding, complaining my coffee was too bitter, and rearranging the living room while I was out getting milk, claiming it was more open now. I bit my tongue, determined not to be one of those mothers who resents her son's partner. I let it go, again and again, until today. A cigarette was the tipping point. Now I'm the one causing tension. As the kettle screamed, I poured the water, sat down with my tea, and looked out the kitchen window. The porch light blinked, and the wind played with the curtains. I considered packing my bags, but then thought, no, I was here first. Maybe it's time I remembered that. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay beneath the quilt I stitched together back in '92, listening to the old pipes clatter whenever someone used the bathroom upstairs. At some point, I heard Harper's laughter, sharp, hollow, like a reflex more than genuine joy. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The bedroom felt like winter's chill, even though the room wasn't actually cold. I resisted the urge to switch on the heater. I couldn't bear the thought of them knowing I was awake just by hearing the thermostat squeak. So there I lay, staring at the ceiling, letting my mind drift back to when I first laid eyes on this house. It was a fluke, really. We stumbled upon it because James missed the turn to the hardware store, and I was in the middle of giving him a hard time for it. Then, out of nowhere, I spotted the for sale sign, not so much standing, but leaning, like it had given up, nestled in the yard like an old forgotten promise. The house looked deserted. One of the shutters dangled. The porch looked like it was tired of holding itself up, and the lawn had swallowed the path whole. But I said, "That's the one." James thought I was pulling his leg, but I was dead serious. The next day, we put in an offer. Everyone called us nuts. The place came with termites, lead paint, and a foundation that creaked just like Grandpa's knees. But here's the thing. We didn't have much money, and our little boy wasn't a fan of apartment living with the constant noise from neighbors. This house, it had solid bones, ugly, stubborn, but solid. We transformed it piece by piece. James taught himself carpentry from a book, while I got the hang of patching drywall and pinching pennies. I painted every room myself in soft hues that seemed to exhale calmness. The kitchen was my pride and joy, and still is, with its yellow walls, blue trim, and a table just right for creating memories. It's more than perfect. After James passed away, I thought about moving, selling the house, and getting closer to my sister in Ohio. But leaving, I just couldn't do it. Every corner of the house seemed to echo his name. Each creak of the stairs felt like he was coming back from the garage, hands greasy, wearing a tired but warm smile. So I stayed and found a new beat to my days. Sundays took me to church. Thursdays were for bingo. And when my knees allowed, I spent time in the garden. And Daniel, well, he'd call. Not as frequently as I wished, but just enough to keep my heart from breaking wide open. Then the divorce happened, and soon after, the boxes arrived. And here we are. It's my house, but it hasn't felt like home for a while now. The next morning, I was up early making breakfast. Not out of desire, but because it's my routine. Scrambled eggs, toast, bacon, the works. I even set the table with the nice plates. Daniel was the first downstairs, hair still damp from the shower, shirt slightly crumpled. He stopped when he saw the table spread. "You didn't have to do all this," he mentioned. I didn't reply, just filled his coffee cup. Harper appeared about 10 minutes later, wearing one of Daniel's old sweatshirts as if it were hers. She sniffed at the food without saying a word, sat down, and quickly buried herself in her phone. We mostly ate in silence, except for Daniel clearing his throat every so often, as if trying to speak but holding back. When they finished, Harper got up, stretched, and without making eye contact, said, "We're heading to the farmer's market. We'll be back later." I nodded. The door clicked shut behind them, and I found myself alone at the kitchen table once more. That's when I opened the drawer. Bottom left. It always stuck unless you knew the trick to open it. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Inside that drawer were all the documents, house deed, insurance papers, and those mortgage check stubs from when James and I got ahead on payments. Everything was perfectly organized, bundled up with rubber bands, and labeled in my handwriting. As I touched the top sheet, I saw our names, mine and his. No, Harper. I reached for the envelope underneath. It had Daniel's name on it. Back when he graduated, we gave him money for a condo, down payment in Phoenix. He lived there for 3 years, then sold it at a profit. Didn't mention it to me until months later. Said he needed the money to restructure his life, whatever that meant. Inside the envelope was a copy of the wire transfer, $50,000. The memo read, "For your first home." Love, Mom. I placed it next to his coffee cup so he could see it, so he'd remember. If he wanted to treat me like some guest in my own home, it was time to remind him who laid the bricks. When they got back from the market, their arms were loaded with things we certainly didn't need. There was a ceramic bowl, supposedly crafted by a local artist, a bundle of lavender Harper claimed would improve the house's energy, and a jar of something pickled that Daniel was thrilled had been fermenting for 22 months. I stayed quiet, just watching as they arranged their findings on the counter like offerings to some imaginary shrine. Harper was buzzing with excitement, laughing loudly, dragging Daniel along as if I were invisible. To her, maybe I was. Daniel's eyes landed on the envelope before I could say anything. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There I was, sitting at the table with my knitting nestled in my lap, watching as the sky outside turned a rusty shade. He picked up the item, slid the papers out, and just stood there, silent. Harper broke the quiet. "What's that?" He didn't reply to her, just locked eyes with me. "Why are you showing me this?" he whispered, voice barely audible. I tucked the yarn back into my lap. "To remind you," I said. "Remind me of what?" he asked. "That I'm not just a lodger here. I built this place, helped you more than once when you needed it, and I deserve basic respect in my own home." Harper rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, not this again." She scoffed. Daniel shot her a look, though she didn't budge. "You're making a big deal over one cigarette," she said, leaning against the fridge like she owned it. "You didn't have to leave that out just to guilt trip him." I turned my gaze to her, not with anger, just exhaustion. "You lit it in the living room, Harper, after I asked you not to." "It was cold outside," she retorted. "There are jackets I replied. Daniel jumped in, hands up like a referee. Can we not do this right now, please? I stood up, slower than I used to, but steady. I've spent months shrinking myself, Daniel, to make space for her, for you. I've held my tongue, ignored the little digs, even tiptoed around my own things as if I were a guest here, but no more. This is my home. Mom, no, he started, but I was firm yet gentle. This is my line, and if you can't live with that, maybe it's not me who needs to find somewhere else. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. He looked completely taken aback, as if I'd just slapped him across the face. Harper let out a dismissive laugh. Unbelievable. I left before they could get another word in, not out of anger, but because I needed to breathe. Real, fresh air, not the kind that's heavy with lavender oil and judgment. So I headed to the garden. It's just a small patch behind the shed, a bit overgrown and mostly weeds now, but it's my sanctuary. Every bulb and root there was planted by my hands. There's an old iron bench back there, its paint peeling away. I sat down, just like I used to when James was still around. He'd sit there with me, reading the paper aloud, chuckling at the obituaries whenever he saw a name he disliked. That old goat finally kicked the bucket, he'd say, then shake his head with a smile. I missed that laugh. I missed having someone who saw me as more than a hurdle. I stayed there until the sun dipped and the mosquitoes got brave. Then I headed back inside. The house was silent. No voices, no movement. I peeked at the driveway. Daniel's car was still parked there, and Harper's too. They were steering clear of me, and that was just fine. I went upstairs, shut my door, and locked it for the first time in ages. And that night, I slept. Not perfectly, but better, because I remembered something crucial. I am my own person first. The following morning, the silence hung in the air. I woke up before dawn, as usual, and shuffled to the kitchen in my slippers. The coffee pot sat bone dry. The sink was spotless, and the lavender Harper had hung by the window was already wilting. If you find this content valuable, please support us with a like and a subscription. I gazed at it for a bit, then quietly snagged it and tossed it into the trash. Next up, I brewed my coffee, just how I like it, strong, black, no frills, before settling at the kitchen table. I watched as the early light slowly stretched across the linoleum floor. I listened intently for any signs of life. Silence. It was almost 9 o'clock when I finally heard some movement upstairs. A door creaked open, footsteps shuffled to the bathroom and back again. But still, no one came downstairs. No coffee, no nothing. Almost amused, I thought to myself, they're hiding. By mid-morning, I'd reached my limit with feeling like a ghost in my own home. So I marched into the living room for a good look around. There was my husband's recliner, where Harper had been camped out night after night, still showing signs of her presence. The coffee table was piled with coasters that never saw any use, and a self-help book Harper left behind about boundaries and energy healing. I rounded up everything that wasn't mine, all the throw pillows, magazines, trinkets, and scented candles that hadn't been here 6 months ago. I carefully packed them into a cardboard box I had kept from Daniel's move. Then I set the box by the stairs, not out of spite, but for the sake of clarity. I vacuumed the rugs, dusted off the shelves, and threw open the windows to let some fresh air in. Just as I snipped away the dead leaves from my spider plant in the sunroom, I heard Daniel's foot creak on the landing. He popped in, looking like a kid, checking to see if he was in trouble. "Hey," he said. "Morning." He walked in, taking a good look around, like everything was brand new to him. "You've been busy," he commented, casting a glance towards the living room. "Yeah, I have," I replied, not bothering to lift my gaze. "Where's the box?" he asked. There was an awkward shift in his stance. "Harper's upset," he mentioned quietly. I snipped another leaf. "No surprise there," I said. "She claims you messed with her stuff." "I only moved things that didn't belong here," I replied. Silence hung between us for a moment before he spoke softly, almost like he didn't want me to catch it. "She thinks you're trying to drive her out." I put the scissors down and looked him in the eye. "I'm not pushing anyone out, Daniel. I'm just taking back some space I gave up too soon." He didn't have a response, just stood there, nervously rubbing the doorframe like he did as a kid. "I thought bringing her here was the right move, starting fresh," he finally admitted. "Maybe it was," I replied gently. "But starting fresh doesn't mean wiping out what's already here." He looked exhausted, and it wasn't lack of sleep. "She's a lot younger than me," he confessed. "I noticed," I said. "She comes from a different world. Her parents live in condos, dine on sushi. They don't exactly tend gardens." I couldn't help but grin. "Shocking," I teased. He let out a small chuckle. "I just wanted her to feel at home, but I can't lose mine in the process." We shared a long look, full of honesty that only comes when things have been laid bare. "I don't want to lose you," he said. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. "Then stop treating me like I'm just another issue to fix." He gave a slow nod. "She's going to be upset," he said. "Let her. That's her battle to fight." I walked by him, heading back to the kitchen where the coffee sat cold. I poured it out and brewed a fresh pot. He didn't follow me immediately. Much later, I heard Harper's voice slicing through the air from upstairs, followed by the slam of a door. That night, the TV murmured through the floorboards, mixing with bursts of laughter that felt forced. Harper was absorbed in one of those reality shows she enjoyed. Women yelling over dinner, men puffing up like toddlers in business suits. To escape the noise, I turned on the radio in my room. Billie Holiday's jazz wrapped around me like a comforting bath, and I let myself drift. I didn't notice when Daniel crawled into bed or when the TV finally fell silent. Morning made its presence known by slipping light into my eyes before the alarm could. When I ventured downstairs, the box was missing. It wasn't returned or unpacked, just gone. I checked the closet by the door, still packed. Checked the garage, still hers. They hadn't left, just made their point clear. I cooked eggs just for myself, set a single place at the table, ate slowly, and for the first time in a month, left the dishes in the sink. Let them discover a home doesn't run on its own. Let them feel the weight of silence. Daniel was the first to appear, looking like he hadn't slept well, eyes puffy, shirt mismatched. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. He stood there, holding his coffee, clearly waiting for my go-ahead to speak. I kept silent, Eventually he broke it, saying, "She thinks you don't like her." I glanced up from my newspaper. "That's not quite right," I replied. He cringed. "She's making an effort, Mom. She really is." "Is she?" I asked. "Does she feel judged because she smoked inside, rearranged my living room, or strolls around as if she owns the place?" Daniel sat down across from me, his coffee untouched. "She didn't grow up like us," he explained. "Her mom let her paint on the walls, leave dishes in the sink, stay out until 2. This house, this structure, it feels rigid to her." And what about my feelings? He didn't have a response. Instead, he rubbed his eyes, saying, "She feels like she's walking on eggshells." "Then maybe she should step lighter," I suggested. He sighed, the kind of sigh that men use to suggest women are being difficult. James used to do that too, but I never let it slide. "I'm not the bad guy here," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I didn't say you were," he replied. "You didn't have to," I countered. He looked down, brushing away a breadcrumb that seemed to offend him as he spoke again, catching me off guard. "We might go on a trip." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Where to?" "Her sister's place, just for a while." To take a breather, to reassess, I nodded slowly, taking a sip of my now tepid coffee. "You should go," I encouraged. "You're okay with that?" I asked, catching my son's eye. My only child, now a grown man, showing signs of age around the edges, still grappling with how to handle discomfort without fleeing. "I'm okay with whatever helps you figure out who you are in this house," I told him, "and what you're willing to stand up for." He met my gaze, not as a son or someone torn between 2 women, but as if he was realizing he'd run straight into an unexpected barrier. "I'll talk to her," he replied. I nodded. "You do that." He left his coffee untouched on the table. Later that afternoon, when they drove off, neither said goodbye. The tires crunched over the gravel as I watched them pass the old mailbox, James's name half faded on the side. I didn't cry, but I didn't smile either. I just stood there, feeling something settle within me, like the house, and I both let out a long breath. The first evening alone was odd, not exactly silent, but still, as if the house was waiting to see if I'd break down or rejoice. I did neither. Instead, I made myself a sandwich, settled in the den, and watched the news with the volume turned low. When the weatherman mentioned a cold front was approaching, I got up and laid an extra quilt on the guest bed, not because anyone was coming, but simply because I could. The air carried the scent of wood polish and old curtains, so different from the perfume sprays Harper used to love. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. As soon as they left, I flung open every window, breathing in the fresh air like a long-lost friend. For the first time in weeks, I felt no need to apologize to the walls around me. Later that night, as I strolled down the upstairs hallway, I noticed Daniel's old room had its door slightly open. Harper's perfume lingered, a sugary scent that felt out of place in a room decorated with baseball posters and soft green paint. I stood there for a while, just taking it all in. Then I flipped on the light and got to work. Starting with the closet, I found her things still there. Dresses not meant for a brief stay, boxes boldly marked with her name, her shoes, her lotions, her makeup bag. Methodically, I moved everything, box by box, into the guest room. I didn't break or discard a thing. I carefully relocated her life elsewhere. Out of Daniel's room, out of James's house. Once I finished, I made the bed, smoothed the covers, and shut the door. I returned to my room and slept better than I had in ages. The next morning, I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer. "Meredith, it's Beverly," I said. "I want to discuss the house." After a pause, she asked if everything was okay. "It will be," I assured her. "I just want to ensure everything is clear." We scheduled a meeting for the following week to go over the documents, ownership, and rights. I wasn't being dramatic. I just wanted to be prepared. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. After the call, I kicked back on the porch with my tea, watching the neighbor kids zoom up and down the street on their bikes. Their laughter rang out like a set of wind chimes, crisp and bright. One of the girls gave me a wave, and I waved right back. Inside, the silence felt different, lighter, like it was truly mine. I spent the day doing small chores, polishing the silver, giving the curtains a good wash, and pulling weeds from the cracks in the front path. Each little task felt like putting another piece back into place. That evening, I whipped up a chicken pot pie just for myself and enjoyed it in the kitchen with Billie Holiday softly humming in the background. Once I finished, I packed the leftovers into containers and scribbled a note for Ruth down the street. Her arthritis had been acting up, and I knew she hadn't been cooking much. As dusk settled, I walked over and left the food on her porch, ringing the bell. When she answered, her eyes lit up. "Beverly, is everything all right?" she asked. "Everything's just great," I replied. "Thought you might want a bite to eat." She studied me for a moment and then smiled. "You look lighter," she said. I felt lighter. We stood there under the glow of the porch light, two women who had weathered the years, outlived their husbands, and persisted, still giving. But now I gave from strength, not obligation. Then came a surprise on Sunday afternoon, 3 days earlier than expected. I was out in the front yard, on my knees, digging around my hydrangeas, when I heard the car pull up. The tires crunched over the gravel, and when the engine shut off, I heard 2 sets of footsteps, slow and hesitant. I stayed on my knees, carefully tending to the new buds, not wanting to break them. Then I heard Daniel's voice calling out, "Mom." I shifted back on my heels and turned to see them at the walkway's edge. Harper clutched a paper coffee cup, sunglasses still on, despite the fading light. "We got back earlier than we thought," Daniel said. "So I see," I replied. "We didn't want to catch you off guard." "Well, you did." His eyes roamed over the porch, the flower beds, the entire house. "Everything looks nice," he commented. "I had the time," I responded. Harper shifted her weight, arms crossed, looking worn out rather than smug. We didn't intend for things to get so tense. For the first time, I really looked at her. She seemed exhausted, deflated. "It wasn't the cigarette," I said, brushing dirt off my gloves. It was assuming my space didn't matter, or that my rules were just suggestions, that I was just in the way, not a person. Daniel stepped closer. "Can we come inside?" After a brief pause, I nodded. Inside, I put the kettle on. The kitchen was filled with the aroma of lemon and thyme from the loaf I'd baked that morning, just for myself, the kind James loved. Daniel noticed immediately. "You used to bake every Sunday." Harper sat at the table, looking as tense as a student, summoned to the principal's office. Daniel joined her. and they both seemed smaller, as if whatever they'd rehearsed in the car had fallen apart in the familiar setting of old wallpaper and linoleum floors. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Listen, Daniel, I said, breaking the ice. We've been through a lot, and yeah, things have been out of whack. He cringed a little. I didn't mean to make you feel pushed out, he confessed. But you did. Harper finally chimed in, her voice quiet but firm. I felt suffocated, like I was invisible. Her eyes dropped to the floor. Daniel leaned in, trying to bridge the gap. We want to fix this, he said earnestly. I poured some water and set down 3 mugs, hoping it might spark some peace, although it wasn't quite there yet. How? I asked into the quiet. Harper broke the silence. We're thinking of finding our own place, she revealed. I blinked in surprise. We discussed it on the drive, she continued. And I realized I need a space where I can truly be myself. I don't want to be the reason a mother and son barely talk. Daniel nodded, admitting, we rushed things. I didn't really think it through. I took a sip of my tea, too hot to drink comfortably, but I welcomed the discomfort, proof that I was alive and right here in the moment. Finding your own place, I said thoughtfully. That sounds like a solid plan. Harper let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for days. But it's not just for you, I added. It's for me too. Daniel tilted his head, curious. What do you mean? He asked. I need my home back, I replied. Not just the physical space, but the atmosphere, the freedom to walk barefoot in the hall without tripping over someone's shoes, to open my fridge without finding organic oat milk I never asked for. There was a pause. Then Daniel laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh I hadn't heard since before the divorce. I miss your milk, he chuckled. That thick whole stuff that clogs arteries. I grinned. Still in the fridge. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. He glanced over at Harper. You good with this? She gave a nod. Yeah, I think so. And just like that, the mood shifted. Not quite cozy, but definitely thawing. We sipped our tea, discussing the logistics, the listings, and how the timeline would play out. As they were leaving, Daniel gave me a hug at the door. Thanks, Mom, he said. I nodded. Then he added, for not kicking us out. I stayed silent because, if I'm honest, I kind of had, just without saying it outright. That evening, I settled into James's old recliner for the first time in what felt like ages. It was like reclaiming a throne I'd forgotten was mine. The cushions remembered me, offering just enough give to make it feel like a warm welcome. I pulled the knitted throw over my legs, the one I made that winter when Daniel went off to college. Back then, the quiet lingering in the house felt different, heavier, filled with uncertainty. Now, the silence felt earned. The house was calm, no voices drifting down from upstairs, no doors swinging open and shut, no laughter sneaking down the hallway like kids raiding the kitchen. Just me and the steady tick-tock of the wall clock, as rhythmic as breathing. I took in the room. The furniture stood just where it always had, my photo albums lined up neatly on the shelf once more. Even the quirky little lamp with its floral shade had found its way back to its perfect spot next to the chair. I let out a deep breath and spoke to him. You would have hated her perfume, James, and in my mind, I could almost hear him grunting in agreement. He was never a fan of anything with a scent. To him, a home should carry the aroma of freshly washed clothes, delicious meals, and maybe a touch of wood polish if the sunlight hit it just right. She rearranged the living room, I told him, moved your recliner to the window, said it opened up the space. Silence, yet I could picture his expression, quiet disapproval, like when a steak's overdone or a picture frame's askew. I chuckled. I allowed her to do it for a while. I let a lot slide. The weight of those months settled on me, but it didn't overwhelm me anymore. Daniel's trying his best, I mentioned. He's stuck, like a fly in warm honey, eager to please her. Please me, please everyone. I reached for my tea, now merely tepid, and took a sip. Eventually, I set boundaries. The clock ticked louder, as if it were keeping a tally. They're moving out. Just saying it brought a mix of relief and sadness, because it shouldn't have taken so long. I shouldn't have had to explain so much just to be acknowledged. But I did, and now things would change. Around 9, there was a knock at the door. I frowned. Wasn't expecting anyone. Opening it, a cool, curious breeze swept in, and then Harper appeared. She seemed smaller, as if the night itself had weighed her down. I didn't mean to bother you, she said. Daniel's in the car. I just wanted to say something. I nodded and stepped aside. She remained standing. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. She stood there by the door, hugging herself like she was trying to keep warm. I never had boundaries growing up, she blurted out. My mom just let me be. Dad was never in the picture. To me, rules felt like being pushed away. I stayed silent, letting her get it all out. So, when you asked me not to smoke inside, it felt like you were shutting me out, drawing lines I couldn't cross. You were right, I replied. Her eyes widened in surprise. I was setting boundaries around my life, around what I've built over the years. Not everything can fit within those lines. She relaxed a bit, her shoulders dropping. I'm sorry, she said, and I believed her sincerity. It wasn't the words, but the crack in her voice, and the fact that she came to me alone. I'm not your enemy, Harper, I told her, but I'm not here to be walked over either. She nodded, then handed me a small box. Inside were new tea towels, blue with tiny violet stitches. They weren't extravagant, but thoughtful. I saw these at the market, she said. They reminded me of you. I ran my fingers over the fabric. They're beautiful. She flashed a quick, crooked smile and turned to go. Just before leaving, she glanced back. You're stronger than I imagined. I met her eyes. I've always been strong. You're just seeing it now. The next morning, I was with Meredith at the kitchen table, surrounded by a sea of manila folders. She was precise and soft-spoken, but didn't shy away from the hard truths. The kind of woman who wore pearls, not just for style, but as her own kind of armor. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. So, she said, as she leafed through the papers, the house is still in your name, giving you full control. But the real question is, what are you looking to protect? I turned my gaze out the window, where the sunlight illuminated the yard like a spotlight on a familiar stage. The south fence still leaned lazily. The hydrangeas were beginning to bloom again, and a bird had made its home in the porch eaves. All of it, I replied. I want to protect everything. She nodded and asked, "That includes your independence?" "Absolutely," I confirmed. "Then we can update the trust." She went on to detail the ins and outs of living trusts, inheritance clauses, and conditions. I listened intently, pen poised, signing wherever she indicated without a second thought. For so long, I believed that keeping the peace meant holding my tongue. But true peace isn't about silence. It's about protection, setting boundaries, and knowing where you stand without sacrificing your self-respect. We spent almost an hour working through the documents. I added a crucial clause. If I ever couldn't live independently, the house wouldn't automatically pass to Daniel. Instead, it would be placed in a trust managed by an impartial third party, ensuring that any decisions would involve my input, either spoken or written. After I signed the final page, Meredith glanced up at me. Most people your age fear upsetting their children. Well, I'm not most people, I retorted. Once she left, I brewed a fresh pot of tea and settled by the window. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The tea towels Harper gifted me were now tucked away, neatly folded in the drawer. I still hadn't made up my mind about using them. Some presents, need a little time to reveal their true worth. Around midday, the phone buzzed once. It was Daniel. I let it go to voicemail, not out of anger, but because I just wasn't ready to dive back into a conversation. I needed a quiet day to let everything simmer down. By evening, my mood had shifted. I wasn't mad or overly confident, just grounded. I pulled out the photo albums, the ones capturing Daniel's childhood. There he was, wearing a makeshift astronaut costume for Halloween, with a mixing bowl and aluminum foil for a helmet. Another shot showed him with James by the lake, proudly holding a tiny fish. And there he stood on graduation day, looking both excited and slightly unsure. Back then, he relied on me for everything. I was there with food, money, rides, and sleepless nights. I wrote checks when he stumbled, took his calls when his marriage was rocky, and opened my door when he had nowhere else to go. But what I needed, respect, reciprocity, and even simple care, often took a back seat. I slid a Polaroid out of the album. It was a bit faded. It showed me with James on this very porch, Daniel on my lap at around 3 years old. I looked so young. He looked so safe. I pinned it to the fridge with a ceramic tomato magnet, one Daniel made in school. Not for nostalgia, but for memory. Because remembering is where not repeating begins. As the sun painted the sky gold, I headed out to the porch swing. It creaked slightly, as it always did. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The air was filled with the scent of lilacs and aged wood, and a gentle breeze lifted a lock of my hair. In that moment, I realized this is all mine, not because I shouted it from the rooftops, but because I finally stopped giving it away. The very next morning I took action. Daniel had left 3 pairs of shoes by the front door, sneakers, work boots, and a pair of loafers he never wore but always kept around. They'd been sitting there for weeks, partly blocking the hallway, like a breadcrumb trail from a life that overshadowed mine. So I picked them up one by one and tucked them away in the coat closet, not out of spite, but to give myself room to breathe. Then, armed with my trusty notepad, the same one I'd use for grocery lists or planning holiday meals, I made a new list. This time, it was about reclaiming my space, take back the garage, return my books to the sunroom shelf, reorganize the pantry, and toss out her protein powders. These weren't mere chores. They were acts of reclaiming my territory. Little by little, I reminded the house it was mine, not a haven for the chaos I'd let in under the guise of being hospitable. I started with the garage, a space James had converted years ago, not for cars, like most men would, but for his tinkering projects. Birdhouses, picture frames, little wooden boxes that held everything from buttons to receipts. After he passed, I kept it neat and sacred. But when Daniel moved in, he said he needed some room for his stuff. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments what city you're watching from. That little piece became a wall, then a corner, and eventually transformed into half the room. Stepping inside now, the scent of sawdust still lingered beneath the sharp aroma of paint thinner and old gym sneakers. His boxes were scattered everywhere. Electronics, broken monitors, and a tangled web of extension cords. I shifted what I could onto the shelves, labeling anything that wasn't mine. Then I stumbled upon something hidden behind an old tarp, the last birdhouse James had crafted. It was incomplete. The paint was only half finished, with one side still bare wood. I traced my fingers along its edges, rough in spots, but sturdy, just like him. I brought it inside and placed it on the kitchen counter. That evening, I settled in the sunroom and flung the curtains wide open. My books had reclaimed their space on the shelves. My gardening encyclopedia, mystery novels, and my beloved dog-eared copy of Little Women, marked with underlined passages. They'd been packed away for months to accommodate Harper's glossy lifestyle magazines and self-help books I never bothered to read. I immersed myself in reading for an hour or perhaps longer. When I eventually stood up, I didn't feel stiff. I felt invigorated. The following day, I received a letter, a genuine one, not just another bill or coupon booklet. It was in an envelope with my name meticulously written in blue ink. It was from Ruth, my neighbor. Dear Beverly, the chicken pie you left was delicious. I haven't had a decent meal in days, and it did more than just fill my belly. You always think of others. I hope someone is looking out for you too. Fondly, Ruth. I held the letter in my hands for a long time. I read it over and over, letting the words sink in. That night, I took out my special stationery, the kind I reserve for important matters, and wrote, Dear Ruth, thank you for your lovely message. I'm doing better now than I have in years. Sometimes a little crack is all it takes to remind you of your strength. I'll drop by with some lemon bars tomorrow. Love, Beverly. I sealed the letter and left it by the door, then glanced around the house. The shoes had disappeared, the garage was silent, and the kitchen radiated the comforting scent of cinnamon. For the first time in ages, everything felt perfectly in place. Just past noon, the phone rang. This time, I answered Daniel's call. Hey, he said, sounding a bit unsure. Hello, I replied, keeping it simple. I didn't want to intrude, just checking in. I let the silence do its magic. He finally spoke. We signed a lease this morning. I allowed the quiet to linger. Sometimes silence says more than any words can. It's small, he continued, but it has a little patio. Harper's really excited. I pictured her there, buying wind chimes, planting succulents in colorful pots, a space all her own, not mine. I'm glad, I said at last. Yeah, me too. Another pause. Then he asked, can I come over? Just me. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to see him, but because I wasn't sure which version of him would show up. The son searching for peace, or the man who only found it at someone else's expense. But I agreed. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. He showed up 20 minutes later, just him and a brown paper bag from the downtown bakery. He handed it to me like he was offering a truce. Blueberry scones, he said. I know they're your favorite. I took the bag and placed it on the counter. We stood there awkwardly, neither of us sure how to start. You've changed the place, he observed, glancing around. I nodded. We finally sat down at the table. He picked up a scone, split it in half, but didn't eat. I haven't been fair, he confessed. To you, to this house, to everything you've done. That got my attention. He wasn't just going through the motions. He went on, I thought if I kept everyone content, everything would stay together, but I ended up making you invisible. I stayed silent, letting his words hang heavy in the air like fog. I was scared, he admitted. Scared if I didn't keep her happy, she'd leave too. And me? I asked gently. He winced. You were always my rock. I thought you'd be okay. That's what people say right before they step over someone to climb higher. He finally looked at me, really looked, and I saw a man, not a boy, trying to grasp the impact he had made. I'm sorry, Mom. It wasn't dramatic. No tears, no shaky voice, just steady and sincere. I took a sip of my tea. It was lukewarm by now, but I didn't mind. Remember when your bike got stolen from the schoolyard? I asked. He looked caught off guard. Yeah, I was 10. You told me not to leave it unlocked. I thought it would be safe. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You cried for 2 straight days, swearing off riding for good. But then James stumbled upon an old bike at a yard sale, tinkered with it, and got it back on the road. I remember that week well. You fell twice. He gave a slight smile, nursing scraped knees. Yet you kept at it. He nodded, understanding. People are like that, I said. You fall, you hurt others. But if it matters enough, you figure out how to improve. He blinked. Are we okay? I placed my hands on the table. We're getting there. That's plenty for now. He lingered for another hour, helped with the recycling, chatted about the garden, and picked some rosemary like he did as a child, playing chef. When he left, his hug spoke of genuine affection, not guilt. The days that followed were calm, a peaceful silence after the storm. Daniel didn't call, as expected. I knew he needed space to settle in. I pictured him and Harper wrestling with IKEA instructions, on the brink of a meltdown over a missing screw. It was their chapter to navigate. I had already turned my pages. I slipped back into my routine, groceries on Wednesday, church on Sunday. I even dusted off my old sewing machine to hem the guest room curtains. It had been ages, but my fingers remembered the rhythm of threading a bobbin. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. One afternoon, Ruth swung by with a jar of her delicious fig preserves. I welcomed her in for some tea, and we settled on the porch like 2 women who've been through the ringer and finally decided to stop apologizing for it all. You know what's funny? She mused, swirling her spoon in her cup. When I was younger, I thought the worst fate was being alone. Now I realize it's feeling alone, even when you're surrounded by people. I nodded in agreement, especially in the place you call home. She gently squeezed my hand. You've done something courageous, Beverly. Many wouldn't dare. It didn't feel like courage. It felt like necessity. That's what real bravery is. Later that evening, I found myself back with the birdhouse James had left unfinished. I grabbed his old brushes, the tiny ones meant for details, and opened a jar of paint I'd stashed in the basement for ages. The paint had thickened, but with a bit of water and patience, it softened up. I painted the roof a bold red. James never used red. He preferred soft greens, earthy browns, and muted blues. But I wanted it to catch the eye like a heartbeat against the house. I painted slowly and carefully, each stroke like words I'd never spoken. I thought about Daniel's question, "Are we okay?" And my response, "We're on the path." That still held true, but I knew what had to come next. The following morning, I pulled out some stationery, wrote a letter in long looping script, folded it, and slipped it into an envelope. Then I tucked it under a magnet on the fridge. It wasn't a goodbye. It was an invitation. Hey, Daniel, I trust your new place is treating you well. Feel free to drop by any Sunday. Just give me a heads up. This house still holds love for you, but it also has its rules, and those are important now. Love, Mom. I decided not to call or text about it, letting it sit quietly like a warm glow in the window. That evening, I set the table for one. Then I thought, why not add a second plate? Not out of hope, but just to be prepared. By the time Friday rolled around, the letter was still pinned to the fridge, untouched. I left it there, like an open invitation. That day, I took a trip to the farmer's market, the same one Daniel and Harper visited a few weeks back, arms overflowing with things they didn't quite need. I moved slowly, lingering at each stall, not because I'm getting older, though my knees do remind me sometimes, but because I wasn't in a hurry to be anywhere else. I picked up some juicy peaches, a jar of local honey, and a small bunch of eucalyptus that made my entire bag smell of tranquility. On my way back to the car, I bumped into Mrs. Darnell from church. We chatted about the heat, this year's tomatoes, and the slower asked if Daniel was still living with me. No, I replied. They've got their own place now. She lifted an eyebrow but didn't dig any deeper, just said, "Good for you," and gave my arm a kind squeeze. What's your take on this? Share your reaction in the comments below. Back at home, I placed the peaches in a bowl right on the kitchen table. I stood there for quite a while, taking everything in. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt just right. Upstairs, I flung open the windows in every room, letting the breeze stroll through the house like a laid-back guest who doesn't need any fuss. Then I did something I hadn't done since before Daniel moved in. I packed a bag, not a big suitcase, like I was running away, but just a small canvas tote with a change of clothes, my book, and my toothbrush. I wasn't escaping or being pushed out. I simply wanted to leave on my own terms. That evening, I drove to the lake where James used to take us during summer. It's the same place Daniel once got stung by a bee and insisted on an ice cream reward. I rented a cabin for the weekend. It wasn't luxurious, just simple with wooden walls, a screened porch, and a view of the water that turned golden at sunset. That first night, I found myself wrapped in a blanket on the dock, listening to the frogs and the wind. I thought about James, about Daniel, and how a house can truly hold your spirit, but only if you're ready to be present in it. The next morning, I brewed some coffee in the tiny kitchen and enjoyed toast with honey. I then grabbed my book and read as the sun danced across the floorboards. No phone, no emails, just breathing. By Sunday afternoon, I was back home. The mailbox was stuffed, so I quickly sorted through it, ditching the flyers and coupons into the trash. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. A small envelope without a return address caught my eye, perched on top. I saved it for last. Inside, a handwritten note read, "Mom, thanks for the letter. We'd love to come over for dinner next week. How about Sunday? Just us. We'll take care of dessert. Let me know. D." A smile spread across my face as I placed the card next to the peaches on the table. Later that night, lying in bed, I found myself gazing up at the ceiling. Thoughts swirled about how easily I could have vanished, how tempting it was to shrink away, to become quieter, more accommodating, just as I had done countless times before. But this time, I chose to pause, to speak up, to stand firm when I could have stepped aside. And now I had the house. I had reclaimed myself. If Daniel wanted to come back, he would find a home, with walls that stood proudly, not bent by silence. Sunday arrived with a gentle breeze, making the porch chimes dance and the kitchen curtain sway. I woke up early, not from anxiety, but out of routine. Our bodies remember what our hearts try hard to forget. I set the table for 3, bringing out the good dishes, those I once reserved for holidays, but had neglected when the house felt suffocated with tension and devoid of warmth. But today was special, not because it was perfect, but because it was chosen. I cooked roast chicken with rosemary, potatoes crisped, just the way Daniel liked them in lemony green, beans. No quinoa, no tofu, no bending over backward to fit into a world that never asked how I felt before barging in. By 4 hours, the chicken rested under foil. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The sun had slowly moved across the living room floor, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. I was on the porch swing, sipping a glass of iced tea, just waiting. Right on time, at 4:23, their car pulled up. Daniel got out first, balancing a covered dish in his hands. Harper was next, carrying what seemed to be a store-bought pie, lemon meringue, a subtle, unspoken message. They approached the porch with a slow, careful pace, like they'd practiced what not to say. "Smells incredible in here," Daniel remarked as they stepped inside. "Dinner's almost done," I replied. "Feel free to make yourselves at home." They settled at the table while I served the food, moving at a leisurely pace. We let the sound of clinking forks and glasses speak for us before any words did. Harper was the first to break the silence. "This looks lovely," she said. "Thanks for having us." I caught her gaze. "Thanks for coming." We shared a quiet meal that wasn't uncomfortable, just cautious, like crossing a newly rebuilt bridge. Daniel inquired about the garden. I mentioned the tomatoes were running late this year. Harper admired the curtains, and I told her I'd made them myself. The conversation was light, yet it flowed easily. After dinner, Daniel pitched in to clear the table while Harper dried the dishes. We moved together like a well-practiced trio, even if the tune had changed. Then, as we stood in the kitchen, the last plate drying in the rack, Daniel asked if he could check out the garage. "Sure thing," I said. He stepped out the back door, vanishing into the dim light of the side yard. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I looked back at Harper. She was standing there, nervously twisting a dish towel in her hands. "Mind if I say something?" she asked. "Go ahead," I replied. She took a deep breath. "You were right about a lot of things," she admitted. I waited, not fully understanding what it meant to step into another person's world. "I thought if I acted like I belonged, I would," she continued. I nodded. "But it doesn't work that way," she realized. "I was more than just rude. I was careless with your space and patience." It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. I thanked her, and she gave a small, genuine smile. Just then, Daniel walked back in, holding something wrapped in an old towel. He carefully unwrapped it on the counter. It was a birdhouse, painted perfectly. "You found this," he said, "and I thought you might like it hung up somewhere." I agreed, suggesting the spot by the kitchen window. "He always wanted one there," I added. "I'll hang it up tomorrow," Daniel promised. They left shortly after, no fuss, just a simple, "see you soon," and I replied, "Yes." The next morning, I watched from the kitchen as Daniel stood on a step stool, hammer in hand, putting up the birdhouse just outside the window. He was meticulous, measuring twice and adjusting until it was perfectly straight. The paint shone in the light, a bright red against the white siding. When he finished, he stepped back, hands on hips, and peered through the glass at me. I waved, and he smiled. Later, over coffee in the sunroom, we watched birds, already taking an interest. By the way, dear viewer, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. "You know, she'd really enjoy it here," he remarked, gesturing towards the birdhouse. "She always appreciated your projects." He glanced down at his mug. "We've been discussing marriage, maybe sometime next year." I didn't bat an eye. "Well, no rush," I replied. "Make sure it's something you both want to build together, not something you feel the need to defend." He nodded in agreement. "I will." There wasn't much left to say after that. At the door, he gave me a tighter hug than usual. No apologies, no promises, just genuine warmth. I watched him drive off and lingered by the window for a while. The birdhouse swayed gently in the breeze, with a small gray bird perched on the edge. It peeked inside, then flew away. It might return, or it might not, but the space remains. Later that afternoon, I settled back onto the porch swing. There was half a lemon pie in the fridge, and my sewing rested neatly on the armrest. As the sun dipped low, it bathed everything in a golden hue, and I realized this is how a woman finds herself again, not through loud declarations or ultimatums, but through quiet, steadfast choices made over time until the world adjusts to her presence. I'm not angry anymore, not bitter, just firmly planted. And if my story resonates with you, if you've ever felt yourself shrinking in your own space, your own life, listen closely. You have the right to draw boundaries. You have the right to reclaim your space, your breath, your name. And if this narrative gave you something meaningful, something real, drop a comment. Share what you've taken back, what you've finally stopped apologizing for. I've shared my story. Now it's your turn. Let's hear yours.